Hey everyone, welcome to StephSellsHomes podcast. Today is episode number 10, and we have a very special guest, good friend of mine. He's a real estate developer, an awesome person, entrepreneur, co-founder of Casitas. His name is Andrew Slocum. Andrew, welcome. Please tell us who you are, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming by today and taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Stephanie. Congratulations on episode 10. That's a great accomplishment. I've watched quite a few of the other ones, and it's really good stuff. Lots of great content from people from all levels. So I really enjoy it. Glad to be a part. Who is Andrew Slocum? I guess, if we're going to phase this around how I got to where I am, a big part of it is that I was raised in Southern California. Grew up in Joshua Tree, so this whole California lifestyle has been really what I've known my whole life. I've been to other places, lived here and there, but really California has been the focus of everything I am. My mother worked for the city of Yucca Valley, so as a single mom, she had to bring me to her council meetings. So I spent a lot of time in city council meetings, a lot of time in planning commission, unknowing that later in life this is going to be a part of my life. So, as a kid, I'm drawing on stuff, and I'm drawing on ordinances and things that I'm going to use as tools later. And I'm just, reading these things as a kid, not knowing how much they're going to affect me later, but it became ingrained in me to where that's part of who I am, is like reading these ordinances and these rules in fine detail and finding, how you can do this and how you can do that. Later in life, I started to really look at real estate as a really great, I figured in life there's two things. You could do like finance and stocks, or you could do real estate. There's like two things you could do to really, be great. And I picked real estate because it's really tangible, and you change the earth. When you're done, you change the earth in some way. So I tried working as just a broker, selling apartments, and I didn't really get it at the time. I definitely didn't have a mentor or anyone teaching me, so I failed very quickly. But then moved to Pasadena after living in many other cities in California, and started working with a gentleman named Roger Phillips, who is based in Pasadena, but he is a land agent. He sold land to developers. And I went to every meeting and was on every call, even in places I should have never belonged there, to learn what I can about real estate development, from the very beginning phases to the financing to just every part of it, and would take on anything I could, whether it's trying to move a historic house across a freeway and realizing that's not possible, to demolishing it, and learned a lot about development from the very beginning to the very end, from just forcing myself into situations that I feel like I can learn. And then what I didn't know, I just wrote down, okay, I don't know what the heck this is. And then when I went home at the end of the day, like, figure out what that means. And even if I'm still lost, okay, I got to figure this out and figure it out. So a lot of self-training and not knowing what I'm doing, but just putting myself out there, which makes a lot more sense today, because that's a lot of what I do now, is just putting myself out there on new stuff that comes in.
Exactly. Oh my God. Well, I love that. What an intro. I don't think I can top that that intro, but it explains so much about you now. I mean, and Joshua Tree, I didn't know that you were from Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree is booming right now, and we'll get to talk about ADUs in the Joshua Tree area and why they're so popular there, and it's becoming the new thing. But wow, I can't believe, like, it all comes full circle, right? You having to see your mother and going to the city hall, and now all that explains your knowledge and background and how it plays a part, which helps me now know that what I'm doing for Alex is kind of the same thing, right? As a single mother, he's watching me, and I know that it may not make sense to him now, but in the future, it's all gonna click, and it'll come full circle. So that's amazing. And you guys, Andrew's doing some amazing stuff. He is a real estate developer, and primarily here in Southern California. And one of the things that I really enjoy is that he's in the multifamily space, a space that I'm looking to transition into. And he knows I've been bugging him with questions offline, and he's almost became my mentor, right? Going back to what he said earlier, which is you need a mentorship, you need guidance. You don't know what you don't know. And so going to someone, just look at what they're doing. And if you like what they're doing, follow, ask good questions, and show up, right? Showing up is half the battle. And he's became a great mentor within the multifamily space. And not only that, on top of that, he specializes in ADUs, which is kind of how we met. It was through an ADU event, and then we took it on to Clubhouse, and we got some Clubhouse rooms going on there, some dope conversations with people, just creating awareness about this topic, right? And I want him to dive deep into a little bit of what Casitas is. He's a co-founder at Casitas, and I think they've got some great things going on over there. So if you can tell us about what you guys have going on there and what the whole ADU movement is about, really kind of help dumb it down and simplify it for the average consumer who's listening to us, and see how they can implement the strategy. Like, why is it so powerful? What do you guys got going on over there in Casitas? And yep, go on.
Yeah, so Casitas was founded from a group of like-minded people with different skill sets. So I recently told Stephanie about the Urban Land Institute, ULI, and it is like an international group of all parts of the development world, from architects to finances to everything in there. And I would go to the networking events because they gave me access to people that were doing greater things than I even, thought I would ever be able to talk to. And they're right there next to me. And I would see some of the same people all the time. And so my partner Gina Wasoric, she came up to me and said, "Oh, do you know about this city of Pasadena, where I live, ADU RFP?" And RFP is when a city says, "We want a program, we need someone to run it for us." And I said, "Oh, I maybe I know about it. I'm not sure." I'm just trying to keep that confidence when you're not even really sure. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So they asked me to join the team. The team is Samantha Hill, who's an architect that did everything from high rises to 55 unit buildings in South Pasadena. Really amazing. And then Gina. And so they asked, "Would you be a part of this team because you know Pasadena, you know people there, maybe we can win." We didn't know we were going to win, but we put it out there. And the proposal was to do an affordable accessory dwelling unit, or ADU program, for residents of the city of Pasadena. And what the city was going to do is give out loans to people that qualified, and then the city would pay for our team to help them along the way, so that the homeowner became like a micro developer. Because it's not intuitive to everyone on what you need to do, your team, any of that stuff. So I didn't know what an ADU was then. I'm not sure if it's the first time I've publicly admitted that, but I had no clue what an ADU was. But I was like, okay, I'm going to find out like everything else. So I looked it up, and I looked up the state law that was going to come into play tomorrow. Because when we won the proposal, it was on December 31st. The law came into play January 1st, 2020. And I started really looking into it. Of course, I looked into a little bit more before then, but I just really didn't completely understand. I understood development, but it just didn't click yet. So I started reading the state law, AB Assembly Bill 86, and started seeing in there that it included multifamily in a much larger way. Single family, you could always, for like the last 7 years, depending on where you are, add another unit, and multifamily was excluded. But with this new bill, multifamily was included in a much larger way, in the sense that you could add 2 more units, detached units, but also there's this provision where 25% of the unit count is what you would be allowed to. And so a lot of the zoning in California, you build to your maximum density and that's it. But this allowed people to go over density. And I had a lot of relationships with people that owned buildings or worked in this. And like, man, if they could add 25% more, or even 2 more, this is amazing. There's a business here, and it's just started today. Like, it's now law today. So my competition is just whoever comes out of the woodwork, but we're all starting even at this point.
Percent.
That's right.
If they go to 8, it's Armageddon.
Yeah, that's right.
How come nobody's talking about this?
You're completely sure of the math.
Look at him. That's my quant.
You're what?
My quantitative. My math specialist. Look at him.
And that was great too, because a lot of times we think, oh, there's so many people, we're so established, that this is today. We're all even. And so Gina and I had met up, and we started talking about it. Casitas really didn't become a company until October of that year. Just because when these laws get passed, cities don't even know how to do it yet. So there really was a lot of times, even after it being the 10th month of the year, we were the first application, or the first time to even ask a city that you could do this. They didn't know.
Can you emphasize on that so that people really get a sense? And, now that I know about your mom and where she came from and her background, it explains why you're so knowledgeable in this space. And can you help the audience understand that municipalities, city, local, state, I mean, they are behind or were behind. They're getting much better now. But dive deep into that also. I want people to know, how that looks like, when working with these counties and municipalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing to mention is normally a city or a county has their own rules and they get to set them. What makes this different is the state of California says, hey, housing in California is become a problem, and now it's a state matter. And so we are going to create these rules, and it's going to go all over. Everywhere in California has to play by these rules. You can change them, you can make them better, but you can't make them worse. You have this standard. And cities, first of all, aren't really used to being told what to do. And second, they have other things they're doing. So it is, you don't always have like a training event where everyone goes, okay, here's the new bill, and we got to know all of these, right? It really is up to us when we're submitting to make sure they understand or they learn about it, which is, I thought it was the other way, but it's not. It's on the developer or the homeowner to say, hey, here's what I want to do. Can I do it? And it's a lot of having this conversation. I think there is this, I don't want to call the city because I might get in trouble but really, like, that's the best thing to do. Call them and say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. Can I do it? How do I do it? And just start diving into it and learning more and more by just having these calls. I mean, some cities are a little bit harder than others to get access to. But if you have to go down there or do an online planning appointment, which, COVID has really been great in the sense that we now have these opportunities that we can do stuff online instead of having to go somewhere. I mean, I can submit plans through ever in California in a place I've never been and never even have to go because of that. And so it's having these conversations with the planner, but also going to the website and looking up what the standards are, the development standards for, say, accessory dwelling units, and saying, oh, I can do up to this size, or I can do this, and just starting to figure out what you can and can't do will be very helpful, because it is somewhat different everywhere. Although the state says this is the rules everywhere, they can exceed it, or there's certain provisions that the city can allow or not allow. So it's not the same everywhere.
Exactly. No, I completely agree with you. I think that a lot of it is just not being afraid. Go out there, understand the process. I mean, Google up the local ordinance in your city, in your area, start there. I can Google them and just read them. And if I don't understand something, I can text Andrew or I can Google that term, right? Like, really dissect these ordinances, get comfortable with the terminology, and communicate with the city. I mean, they're there to help us, not to scare us off, and they're there to set a standard, right? And so once you know what it is that you're talking about, you may not have to know everything in detail. Like he said, just kind of go on there and see what it is that you can and can't do and start there. That should be your your foundation. But okay, I'm going to take a quick pivot here because what I really wanted to dive deep into is the multifamily space and how the ADU strategy. I mean, I've done a lot of podcasts talking about implementing the ADU strategy in the single family space, right? And so some of the things that I've noticed in the single family space is everyone wants to apply it, but financing isn't quite there yet, right? Just like municipalities and cities are a little bit behind with the process itself, I feel like the financial world is also a little bit behind. What is it that you see in the multifamily space, and can you tell us how powerful that strategy is when it comes to multifamily units? I know that there was one, we can talk about it and maybe not in detail, but that complex, that 42 unit complex, how they were able to get that offer accepted through underwriting the ADUs. I'd love if you can also use that as an example, because that blew me away. I mean, that applying that ADU strategy in the multifamily space, that's the prime example of why we should all be talking about this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There, just to touch on what you said on the single family space, they are definitely behind. The federal loans are behind. Also, on the back end, like appraising it and saying what it's worth afterwards, it's like become an issue to where they value, another rental unit at maybe 25,000, which is ridiculous, right? Like that's not, it should be valued at the same as any other rental, a duplex, anything else. But so yeah, that's being caught up with. It's going to take its time, but there is movement on it. Just like that the White House hosted an event showing that the federal government is now aware of this and they're moving. So that it's good news, right? On the multifamily space, financing is usually a little bit easier because they are pretty much just considered another rental unit. Yeah, it gets a little dicier when we're talking about a duplex, which what is a multifamily building is probably important, right? In the eyes of an accessory dwelling unit, a multifamily building pretty much everywhere, as a rule of thumb, is 2 units that are attached to each other or more. So if you have a duplex where they're touching, that's multifamily. Now, if you have a home here and a home here, in I'd say 90% of California, that is not multifamily. Those are 2 single family residences. It's when they're attached to each other, that's when multifamily rules apply, and that's where you get this additional standards that single family doesn't have. But we work in the space from anywhere from a duplex up to, I think our largest project is 700 units. And why this really is starting to be used more, and that project that you spoke about, I just coincidentally got the chance to get more insight. So I've worked with Latino Development when I was working with Roger Phillips, and they're a fairly large developer in the Los Angeles area. I mean, 700 units, 1,000 units. They do really big buildings, and they do 55 and more in areas. So that hit the front page of CoStar, like the MLS for multifamily for commercial building, and it blew people away that this is now a strategy. It was taken seriously, like when big boys, the big groups are using it. And I was in an event in Santa Monica, and I spoke to a broker who was trying to win the bid on the project, and he lost out. There was something like 10 to 15 bids, and they couldn't figure out why they lost it. And the reason they lost it is because they were just looking at it as is. The same thing we do anything. Here's the income. Here is a value add potential, but they weren't looking at the value add to the value add, meaning that yes, you can renovate the units and bring up the rent, but now you can add 25% more to it. And the person who had that buyer looked at it that way. Latera Development looked at it because they're a developer, saying we can add 25%. Let's go through this building and look at every area we can. Where can we add more units? Can we build more stuff that we can later turn into units? And that, because of that, they were able to value what they could pay for it at a much higher, because you're adding 25% more to it. If you go and reverse that land value is so much higher because you're going to end up with a higher NOI. So they were able to win that property from everyone else because they saw another potential that no one else was looking at. And really, from the selling broker, they were the only ones that looked at it this way. And so now on the multifamily brokerage side, we're seeing all these influx of people saying, we need a feasibility study. We need to see how to do this because we don't want this to happen again. We don't want to lose this opportunity because we didn't even think about this. It's interesting.
That was genius. I think that that's going to set the new standard. And, it's similar to, you and I have also talked offline in the single family space. And I've told you kind of what I've seen, which is the same thing. People are willing to pay overpriced because they see the potential forced appreciation that they can do, right? Besides the value add, on top of the value add, it makes sense to then submit an offer of $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 over the price. It's insane, right? And so that's why I don't see any sort of slowdown either in the residential or the multifamily space. The other thing that I like about the ADU strategy is, like Andrew mentioned, it applies to residential and it applies to multifamily. Unlike SB9, which is kind of like the new thing that's flying around right now, but I feel that it's kind of like what ADUs were 3 years ago. It's still, we still have to see how that's going to come into play and how certain people will apply that strategy. But with ADUs, I mean, what we just talked about, that example there alone should really have you turning this way and trying to get more details about the ADU space.
Had huge upside potential with very little downside risk. Does that ring a bell? Okay, great. Well, reason for the call today, John, is something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing I've seen in the last 6 months. If you have 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. You got a minute?
One of the things that I would also like for Andrew to explain is, a lot of people want to know What should I look out for? A lot of people ask me when looking to build. We can get all this access on the internet and Google the process, right? But what are some of these things that I should look out for? And one of the things that I think we could talk about is that appointment we went to, you and I, which was in a coastal area. And I remember when I reached out to you, I said, hey, I have a client who's interested in building or converting existing space. Actually, this client wanted to do both things, wanted to convert and add additional space. But there are certain things that we have to look out for. And so, what would be like those top 5 things that you would say look out for these things when considering to buy a property or buy a multifamily space, even, right? And build these ADUs?
Yeah, that one was interesting because it was originally shown to be in a coastal area, and coastal areas are ruled by the California Coastal Commission, and they get to overpower some of the state laws, and maybe they aren't ready yet, so they can actually say we're not going to allow ADUs right yet because we're not there yet. That project was not in one, but everything else was it, but they had it listed as one, so we had to go to the city and they were like, wow, this isn't one, but it is. And they ended up removing it from there, which was, it's just more like looking into things to avoid. So that's definitely one of them. If you're, near the beach, check to see if you're in a coastal commission area and then see if their rules, if they have them yet, if they're there. Some of them are still working on it. So it may just eliminate you right there. So if you're in that area, definitely check that out first. Next, something that comes up quite a bit with garages is checking to make sure you're not within an easement or a power pole line, because you can't live under a power pole within a certain distance. It's usually 5 feet if you get a clearance, or 10 feet if you just there, because you can't have people living under. You can park your car there, that's fine, but you cannot live under it. So that's definitely very important, because a lot of times these accessory dwellings are in the back, and that's where the power lines are. So checking for easements. Next, I would say taking a look at your utilities. We've had many projects that have just died in the water because the cost of the electrical upgrade would have been 500,000 to $1 million, because we would need to do another transformer and move all the meters, and it could kill a project right there. Taking a look at where the distance is to the utility connections, because your trenching and digging is going to be a big cost. Definitely something to take a look at. There was something else I was just going to say. Um,
Septic? Septic.
Septic, yeah, absolutely. Septic, absolutely.
I think another one that's out there is for new construction, it's the solar panels, and so all these little things that he's mentioning can quickly add up, right? If you need to trench, that's an expense. If you need to have to remove and reposition these power poles, that's another expense that you don't want to have to go through, right? So yeah, everything that he just mentioned can quickly add up, and you can go from having a $250,000 ADU project to 350 real quick because of all these details. And that's speaking in single family numbers, not in the multifamily space, right?
I remember what I was saying. It's the fire. So the distance between your closest fire connection is important, because then even though it says no sprinklers are allowed, if you're too far away, you may have to add sprinklers, and that's another maybe 5,000 to each project or more if you don't have the adequate fire line, and then you'd have to upgrade the water line to the entire street. I mean, you could assume that cost is going to be prohibitive, right? If you have to upgrade the water line to the whole street. So that is definitely another thing. Your distance from your fire meter
I love it.
or fire.
Yeah, these are all little things that you can't necessarily Google just yet, maybe because, you have to work with the right team, which takes me on to the next question, and the next question is, if I wanted to tap into the multifamily space, how do I do it? Who's part of my team? I know that me, myself, as a realtor in the residential space, it's not just me, myself, and I. I have a team, right, of people that back me up in what it is that I do day to day and how I handle my business and how we manage expectations with clients and try to make it a smooth transition for them in the investment world and when applying this ADU strategy. So in the multifamily space, if I was looking to tap into multifamily and ADUs, who's part of my team? Who's everyone on my team? And how do we all just work synchronized well? What would be that ideal team model?
Yeah, well, if you're a multifamily owner and you're looking to add ADUs, your team is Casitas, right? That's pretty simple. Just come to me. No, I think it's helpful to know what it is you need in the together. So you need building plans that are a full set, and that is divided into three parts. It's divided in your architectural sheets, which is either done by an architect or a designer. Those are the people that do that in California. You don't have to be an architect if you are doing a certain type of unit count or a certain type of building. And you need a structural engineer. Even if it's an existing building, you have to show that it structurally will be sound differently than, say, the garage or whatever it is you're building. And you need your energy consultant. Um, those are the three members of your team you need in designing a full set of plans you go in. But really, it's nice to have a team that talks to each other, because your architectural design will have to match what you structurally are building, and those changes go to your energy consultant. So those plans will change from the very conception to the end, and you want them to know each other and work well together, because if they don't match up, you're going to take longer. You're going to have a problem when you get to construction, because sometimes things get approved that are not buildable. And that's a major problem. Yes, you have a stamp, but can this actually be built? No, it can't, and that does happen. At one point I didn't think that was possible. It definitely is possible. So those are your team members. You want to have those three parts. Hopefully, a group that either handles them all or they work well together. Asking for a recommendation of who you've worked before definitely helps. Then you get your full set of plans, which gets submitted to the city. You go back and forth from corrections, and then you finally get your building permit. That leads you into your general contractor. If you don't have your own builders, you're an owner builder and you have your own people, and your general contractor, I typically engage my general contractor in the very beginning if possible to see if these plans, there's anything we can cut out. It's even worth paying a small fee. I've seen plans that have been done that are over designed or poorly designed that will cost an additional $200,000 because no one engaged with builders. Say, well, why are we doing this? Maybe let's change this. You'll still get the same thing, but it'll be designed, value engineered from the very beginning. So even if you have to pay someone a little bit to look at them, it's definitely worth it on the end when you're paying to build it. And then once I near my second round of corrections, which almost happens, that's when I feel like my plans are pretty stable and that's what I'm going to build. And I put that out to general contractors to provide a bid and go from there, because you're pretty close to getting your building permit. And you'll now have a better chance of a general contractor that's busy engaging you, because this isn't in the very beginning, right? You're very close. They know you're about to sign a contract. That's when I start engaging them and saying, hey, I am ready to build this. I need a general contractor. Please provide a bid. And I get at least three of them, especially if you don't have a group you work for. And then you start to compare them and see how they're differently. And I wouldn't always say that the lowest cost is the way to go about it. There's certain questions to ask, like, when is your timeline? How many of these have you built? The cheapest may run out of money during the project, which happens, or they may have bid it lower because they know during the project they're going to have to change a lot of stuff and it's going to be the same price at the end. So really comparing what's included and what's excluded is really important too, so that you have a full picture of, from the very beginning of construction to getting you to the very end, what that'll look like.
Well, then I'm just going to call you when I'm ready, because that sounds complicated. But I can see how in the real estate space, with what I do on a day-to-day basis, those people would be my lender and my GC and escrow officer, right? And so you definitely want to have everyone in sync and have everybody on board with communicating, and the earlier the better, because just like the realtor and the lender, if they're not communicating well during the transaction, it can delay the deal. It can break or make the deal because of lack of communication and setting expectations and looking out for things that you might miss or I don't specialize in, or you have, your job, which plays a big part in the deal and the transaction. So I love that. And I would also say, do you have everything in-house, everyone you just mentioned? So your engineer, your designer, architect, and your GCs and subcontractors, you have that under Casitas? I'm assuming like you have access to all of that. Everybody, you have a team of everyone that you just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. We have who we've used today, and as we grow, we continuously look to add people to the team, but we really want to make sure it's someone that continues with our process and how we do things. Trying to, not just building a business as a brand, but knowing what works, that someone isn't going to come in and try to change it all and over design, or just, everyone has their own process, but we have ours. And we want it to be someone that fits in with our process. And so, yeah, we're continually expanding with all parts of the team. We have it all in house, but then also some strategic partners with general contractors as well that we know build and understand multifamily and get this done versus just, decided to join the space today because it's popular. We'd rather have someone that's been there, done it, and maybe if they cost a little more, we know we're going to get to the final result. So, yeah.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because one thing I have noticed with this whole ADU trend that's going around is GCs back then were not marketing towards ADUs, right? Now every GC, you turn left and right, and every GC is ADU specialist. And so you really have to make sure and see who is the specialist, because the ADUs haven't been around for that long, right? And so they have been, but unpermitted and under different laws back then, and under different terminology back then. But in the recent years, right, in these last couple of years, you have been doing it as an expert in the field. I wouldn't say that every GC out there has actually built an ADU, which is very different from a kitchen renovation or just a small remodel. The process itself, right, and the inspections themselves are very different. And so having someone like Andrew on your team is definitely essential and much needed. They do have options like doing an owner built in the residential space. But again, if you're not knowledgeable in the space, I would highly advise you to work with a team and work with somebody that you trust, someone that is knowledgeable and that can take you, like he said, from A to B, from start to finish, and make it a smooth transition for you guys. And I just want to thank you again, Andrew. I really appreciate your time today. I think we'll definitely have a part 2, because we've got some cool stuff coming up. Like I said, we have Clubhouse events, we have pop-up rooms in my ADU room and a few of our other friends. And we just like to create awareness around the ADU space within the multifamily space. And so we'll kind of keep you guys updated with any market trends, any new ADU stuff going on, and any projects that Andrew has coming up. I would also say that the contractors that are good and the developers that are good are very busy right now because ADUs are so popular. So if someone is very available or their cost is the lowest one, it's not always the best route. So really vet everybody that you choose to work with. And again, check out what Andrew's doing. Are you, let's talk about Joshua Tree before I let you go really quick. I love Joshua Tree because I'm looking to invest there. I know of a realtor who recently bought one off market, like little 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and I mean the lot sizes are huge out there. What are the ADU laws looking like? I haven't read the actual Joshua Tree ordinance, so if you can give me some insight on that before I let you go, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, Joshua Tree falls under San Bernardino County. So it's unincorporated area. So anything San Bernardino County, that's where you start with. And I've worked with San Bernardino County quite a bit, and they're very responsive. They're very easy to speak to, as in that they share knowledge with you. So start by looking at San Bernardino County and looking what you can do there. Joshua Tree is a very interesting place right now. Because I grew up there, a lot of the friends that I follow from just being friends are now agents. I'm looking at what's selling there, and it's gotten to a point where it makes sense to add ADUs because now the cost to build them is less than the cost to buy something. And that's something you always have to think of, right? If you can buy a new house for less than what you could build one, that's the way you go. But now we're talking about 600 square foot homes trading for 600,000, 1,000 square foot. I mean, it's incredible. But if you can now build for, say, 200, 250 a square foot, that's when you're like, okay, this totally makes sense because I build it at this. This is what it's worth. That's why we do it. That's our profit margin. So they follow a lot of the state laws. They haven't really gone too far above it, but 800 square foot units are exempt from any local development standards. Big lot sizes, but you also have to make sure you're within the range of utilities and things like this. So yeah, start with looking at the county. But it does make sense. Joshua Tree has a very massive affordability problem, and I'm also a housing advocate. I advocate for smart development, a new way of thinking of it, and affordability. And I had a revelation listening to the news in Miami yesterday. they're talking about affordable housing. It has 40 affordable housing units. Does that mean all the other units are unaffordable? Yeah, I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting,
Exactly.
right?
And you know, one of the things I noticed in Joshua Tree, which I've heard from just people going out there and wanting to invest, is the the economic growth is not going as quickly as the real estate appreciation. And so, and it's because of the high demand of people from LA or different people from different states wanting to invest in Joshua Tree, because now it's like the new Palm Springs, or becoming the new Palm Springs, right? These prices are ridiculous for the average just homeowner in that area, or anybody who's looking to buy in Joshua Tree. And the houses are, I was looking them up last week, they're somewhere between 450 to 650. But people's wages haven't increased to be able to qualify or get pre-approved for something in that price range. But it's these people that are coming from, so there's a little bit of I understand where you're coming from, and I kind of see that as well, which is why we just have to continue to create this awareness around ADUs to empower those homeowners so they have more control over their real estate and their properties there in Joshua Tree.
The ADU thing is great because you're adding more units to what you were allowed before. So yes, you bought yours at 450 to 600, but now you can add another rental unit and help add more to what's there. So someone that, like my brother is a manager of Joshua Tree Saloon right there on the highway and Park. And he, even though he runs a very busy establishment, finding a place to live was really hard for him. And so this adds us, yes, you can have your primary unit that you short-term rental or live there or whatever, but now you can add a rental unit and cash flow on that as well. So it adds another way to look at things and do things in a way that socially and economically help the area, as well as turn a profit and make us all money and help us live a better life.
Yeah, and just be more intentional with everything. I'm also a housing advocate, ADU advocate, and home ownership advocate. So that's why we were here, and we hope that everybody enjoyed the podcast. I know that Andrew is a busy guy. Any closing thoughts, Andrew? Anything that you want to share? Do you have any stages coming up? Any events, or just anything? Where can people connect with you if anyone decides they want to build some ADUs or get some projects going with you?
Yeah, no, I mean, this was something I was looking forward to. I don't know what's next. I mean, we're really, because there's what happened with that larger project, we have a lot more work that's a little different than before. Like a lot of agents and brokers are now saying, what can we do here? And that wasn't what we were doing before. But I also think, because you have a lot of agents that are here, also think about including plans with your listing, because they don't sell for what the costs are. They sell for much more. So you're gonna create more value that way as well. I mean, I don't think anyone has a problem selling a house right now. I feel like it just disappears the minute you list it, but it's just something to think about. And that's what our multifamily brokers are doing. Are like, I can get the plan set started already, and so this person already can buy it that way, and I can charge 4x for it or whatever. So start looking at it that way. Our website is casitas.la. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say this, but we are so busy we can't take single family projects on. Because at one point I'm like, yeah, bring it. But I'm like,
I love that though. That's a great place to be in. I mean, yeah, he's busy. That's why I said, pay attention who you guys decide to work with, because people that know what they're doing and are good at what they do, and it shows that he has a system down and he has a team. They're doing well, and they're very busy because everyone wants to implement the strategy. I think you're going to see a lot of realtors this year wanting to learn more about the process. There's going to be a lot of brokers, developers, everyone wanting to, figure out how they can implement this strategy. And so, yeah, I got to say, with the plans, that's a very smart play with listings. And if you take it a step further, I would also include the GC or architect or whoever is helping you with that process, put their information in the MLS so that, if they have any questions, you can eliminate a lot of those doubts from the buyer side, or, just the opposite party, and have all that information disclosed up front and make it, once again, a much smoother process for everyone. It's just being super transparent. I'm all about that. And so, yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And I got to thank you again, Andrew. And I'll see you on Clubhouse. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.